Hello and welcome to another episode of today's GK. I am Pooja Divedi, and in this segment we bring to you objective questions on a daily basis to help you crack prelims. So let's begin with the practice question of last segment. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, recently appointed the 7th Director General of the World Trade Organization, belongs to which of the following African countries? Ethiopia, Kenya, Sudan and Nigeria. So the correct answer to this question is Nigeria. Moving on to the explanation. Nigeria's Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala was appointed the 7th Director General of World Trade Organization on Monday, making her the first woman and the first African to head the multilateral trade body from March 1, 2021 to August 31, 2025, and she is the former Finance Minister of Nigeria and World Bank economist. Also, the US, under the Donald Trump administration, had blocked her appointment despite strong endorsement from almost all WTO members, including India. However, the Biden administration extended the US support to her, following which South Korea's candidate Yoo Myung-hee withdrew from the race. She takes charge at a time when developed countries have challenged the development agenda of WTO, such as special and differential treatment provisions, and opposed the India-South Africa joint proposal for a temporary waiver of TRIPS obligations to ensure uninterrupted flow of vaccines to the developing and least developed nations. So if we talk about the flow of vaccines, the vaccines are seen to be cornered by the developed countries who are economically and financially strong in order to fund the entire vaccination program for their countries. So WTO is trying to achieve less and less vaccine nationalism and more free flow of vaccines, and especially for those who are in dire need of it. Alright, moving on, let's talk about the first question. Consider the following statements with reference to the World Trade Organization. It is the only global international organization dealing with the rules of trade between nations. The WTO can stimulate economic growth and employment and also cut the cost of doing business internationally. So, which of the statements given above is or are correct? One only, two only, both one and two, neither one nor two. The correct answer to this question is C, both one and two, both the statements are correct. Moving on to the explanation, the WTO is the only global international organization dealing with the rules of trade between the nations. At its heart, if we talk about, are the WTO agreements negotiated and signed by the bulk of the world's trading nations and ratified in their parliaments. The WTO's global system lowers trade barriers through negotiations and operates under the principle of non-discrimination. The result is reduced costs of production because imports used in production are cheaper, and reduced prices of finished goods and services, more choice, and ultimately a lower cost of living. So the WTO system deals with these in two ways. One is by talking countries negotiate through rules that are acceptable to all. The other is by settling disputes about whether countries are playing by those agreed rules or not. The WTO can stimulate economic growth and employment. The WTO can cut the cost of doing business internationally, and it can also encourage good governance, transparency, shared information and knowledge, and it levels the playing field. Moving on to the next question. Consider the following statements with reference to the Ajmer Sharif. It is a Sufi shrine or dargah of the revered 13th century Sufi saint Moinuddin Chishti, located at Ajmer, Rajasthan, India. It is an example of Indo-Islamic architecture, and the dome features a lotus and a crown of gold donated by Rampur's Nawab Haider Ali Khan. So, which of the statements given above is or are correct? One only, two only, both one and two, neither one nor two. The correct answer to this question is C. That is, both one and two, both the statements are correct. Ajmer Sharif Dargah is a Sufi shrine, one of the revered 13th century Sufi saint Moinuddin Chishti, located at Ajmer, Rajasthan, India. And the shrine has Chishti's grave, that is Maqbara. And if we talk about its architecture, it is an example of Indo-Islamic architecture, and the dome features a lotus and a crown of gold donated by Rampur's Nawab Haider Ali Khan. The white marble dome of Chishti's shrine was built in the year 1532, beg your pardon. This date is inscribed in golden letters on the northern wall of the Dargah. It is located in the Ihata Nurani of the complex, and materials used to build it include marble, brick and sandstone. The Dargah has a royal darbar, Mehfil Khana, that was constructed in 1888, and it is a square structure and has a patterned ceiling. Moving on to the next question. Karlapath Sanctuary, recently seen in the news, is located in the state of Andhra Pradesh, West Bengal, Odisha, Maharashtra. The correct answer to this question is C, that is Odisha. So 6 elephants die of hemorrhagic septicemia in a fortnight in Odisha's Karlapath Sanctuary. Hemorrhagic septicemia is a contagious bacterial disease which infects animals that come in contact with contaminated waters or soil. The respiratory tract and lungs of the animals are affected, leading to severe pneumonia, and the disease generally spreads in the period right before and after the monsoons, and it can affect cattle, buffalo and other animals. Moving on to the next question. Consider the following statements with reference to the tribes in India. Among the 75 listed PVTGs, that is, particularly vulnerable tribal groups, the highest number are found in Odisha, and Jarawas and Onges are the tribal people dominant in all the parts of Andaman and Nicobar Islands. So which of the statements given above is or are correct? 1 only, 2 only, both 1 and 2, neither 1 nor 2. The correct answer to this question is A, that is 1 only, the second is not. Moving on, among the 75 listed PVTGs, the highest number are found in Odisha, and the Jarawas are an indigenous group of people of Andaman Islands in India. They live in the parts of South Andaman and Middle Andaman Islands, and the Little Andaman Island is home to the Onge tribes, and these tribes are fewer than 100. Proposals for tourism and port development in Andaman and Nicobar Islands have worried conservationists over the fate of local ecology, particularly giant leatherback turtles, and it has sought the de-reservation of over 200 square kilometers of pristine rainforest and also of about 140 square kilometers of the Onge Tribal Reserve. So if we talk about such tribes, these are actually very isolated and they do not keep pace with the evolution of the entire world right now. And that is why these tribes are more and more at a risk of being much more isolated, right? And because of Andaman and Nicobar not being that touched when it comes to actually revising the entire ecological system or any kind of infiltration, so it's of course very alarming to the conservationists. Moving on, let's talk about our next question. Consider the following statements with reference to Rohingyas. They are an ethnic group, mostly Muslims, and were classified as resident foreigners or associate citizens by Myanmar. Ethnically, they are much closer to the Indo-Aryan people of India and Bangladesh than to Sino-Tibetans of the country. So, which of the statements given above is or are correct? 1 only, 2 only, both 1 and 2, neither 1 nor 2. The correct answer to this question is C, that is both 1 and 2. So, Bangladesh authorities sent a 4th group of Rohingya refugees from Myanmar to Bhasanchar Island in the Bay of Bengal despite calls by human rights group for a halt to the process. They are an ethnic group, mostly Muslims. They were not granted full citizenship by Myanmar and they were classified as resident foreigners or associate citizens. So now, because of the coup d'etat that has taken in the country of Myanmar, the risk of more marginalization of such ethnic groups are lingering because of the ethnic cleansing, a textbook example of ethnic cleansing as put by the United Nations. The military is all powerful right now in Myanmar, and this could also affect much more movement of Rohingyas from Myanmar to the neighboring countries. Moving on, ethnically they are much closer to Indo-Aryan people of India and Bangladesh than to Sino-Tibetans of the country. So if we talk about Bhasanchar, it's an island and it has been developed in order to put the refugees there in order to reduce the burden on Bangladesh. Many embankments and cyclone shelters, hospitals, schools have been developed by Chinese and British companies in order to put these refugees there. And of course, because it is a mud flat and it is falling at the mouth of river Meghna, because of that it is very vulnerable for more and more sedimentation. And if we talk about more and more sedimentation, it is also very vulnerable because of the increasing sea level. It is vulnerable to go deep down the sea. Alright, moving on. If we talk about our next question, it says, the report Traffic Crash Injuries and Disabilities, the Burden on India Society is released by World Health Organization, World Bank, United Nations or Niti Aayog. The correct answer to this question is B, that is World Bank. Moving on, the Union Minister for Road Transport and Highways released the World Bank report titled Traffic Crash Injuries and Disabilities, the Burden on Indian Society. The report has been prepared in collaboration with the NGO Save Life Foundation, and the survey data was collected from 4 Indian states: Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Tamil Nadu and Maharashtra. Also, let's move on to the next question, which says, consider the following statements about navigation in Indian constellation, that is NAVIC. It is an Indian regional navigation satellite developed by DRDO, and it consists of 8 satellites in the geosynchronous orbit. It works similar to the global positioning system but within India only. So which of the statements given above are not correct? 1 and 3 only, 2 only, 2 and 3 only, 1, 2 and 3. The correct answer to this question is D, that is 1, 2 and 3. All the 3 statements are false. Moving on to the explanation. So navigation in Indian constellation or NAVIC is an Indian regional navigation satellite system developed by ISRO, and the main objective is to provide reliable position navigation and timing services over India and its neighborhood. It consists of 8 satellites, 3 satellites in geostationary orbit and 5 satellites in geosynchronous orbit, and NAVIC works just like the established and popular US global positioning system but within a 1500 kilometer radius over the subcontinent. Moving on, let's look at our next question. Consider the following statements about the National Statistical Office. NSO is the central statistical agency of the government mandated under the Statistical Services Act of 1980. It is under the aegis of Ministry of Home Affairs. So which of the above sentences is or are correct? 1 only, 2 only, both 1 and 2, neither 1 nor 2. The correct answer to this question is A, that is 1 only. So NSSO has been merged with the Central Statistics Office under the aegis of Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. The order dated 23rd May 2019 has cleared formation of an overarching body, the NSO, through the merger of NSSO and CSO. NSO is the Central Statistical Agency of the government mandated under the Statistical Services Act of 1980, and it is under the aegis of Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. Moving on to the next question. Brasilia Declaration is related to desertification, biodiversity, ozone, road safety. The correct answer to this question is D, that is road safety. So this declaration came into practice in 2015 and was signed at the 2nd Global High-Level Conference on Road Safety held in Brazil. India is a signatory to the declaration, and the countries plan to achieve the SDG 3.6, that is to halve the number of global deaths and injuries from road traffic accidents by 2030. Moving on to the next question. Consider the following sentences about the repo rate. It is the rate at which the central bank of a country, that is RBI, borrows money from commercial banks in the event of any shortfall of funds, and it is primarily used by the government to decide their dearness allowance. So which of the above sentences is or are correct? 1 only, 2 only, both 1 and 2, neither 1 nor 2. The correct answer to this question is D, that is neither 1 nor 2. So, repo rate is the rate at which the central bank of a country lends and not borrows money to the commercial banks in the events of any shortfall of funds. And if we talk about the reverse of it, under which rate the central bank, it borrows money from the other banks, scheduled banks, that is the reverse repo rate. Alright, and it is used by monetary authorities to control inflation, and consumer price index is primarily used to decide any kind of dearness allowance. So let's move on to our practice question. Which of the following ministry decided to set up a digital intelligence unit? Ministry of Science and Tech, Ministry of Home Affairs, Ministry of Communications, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. So, I hope you found this segment informative. That's it for today. Tomorrow we shall meet again with another segment. Until then, stay updated and thanks so much for watching.